Hi, my name is Luís, and I am a PhD student at Costa, at the Department of Psychology. Regarding my LGBT experience in academia and in the university, I have a great experience. Goldsmiths is kind of famous for being very diverse. I mean, we have what the Daily Mail would call like crazy Marxist at large. So I have great role models as colleagues and great role models as professors and lecturers. I came out to my supervisor very naturally during my first year of the PhD. I'm now on my last one. And he didn't really have a reaction, so it's run really. So that's about it. I have a great experience regarding that. Today I'm here to talk to you about two things that people tend to be very interested in, which is personality and also relationships. And specifically, I will explain to you why I got into this research area, and I will explain a bit more what are personality disorders and how they were conceptualized before and how they are conceptualized now. I'll also talk a bit about the stuff that I'm doing right now, and then I will show you a little bit of a teaser of a study that I ran a few months ago regarding personality traits and relationships. But first things first, what is a personality disorder? It is one of the most misinterpreted and misrepresented mental health issues or mental disorders in society. People have a lot of misinformation about them. People jump into conclusions and diagnose people with any kind of information without knowing what actually a personality disorder is. And recently we have a great example about that, which is everyone diagnosing Donald Trump with a narcissistic personality disorder. And as an expert, I can say for a fact that he has not one. So that's my input in that conversation. Personality disorders have also been very represented in cinema and novels, and I brought these 4 examples which you might recognize. This chap here is Dr. Hannibal Lecter, and he's a very classic case of antisocial personality disorder, which used to be known back in the day as psychopathy. This girl here, she's Winona Ryder in Girl Interrupted, and it's a very classic case of borderline personality disorder. And then this one here, I do not remember the name of her character or the actress name, but she is in The Great Gatsby, and she has a classic case of a personality disorder we no longer consider as existing, at least I don't, called histrionic personality disorder. And then there's a mean girl, and some argue she has a classic case of narcissistic personality disorder. But what is exactly a personality disorder? So according to the American Psychiatric Association, which are the guys that kind of define these things for us, for better or worse, the essential features of a personality disorder are impairments in personality, self and interpersonal, so the way we relate to other people, and also the presence of pathological personality traits. So these are the things that I actually focus on, and I will talk in detail about them a bit later. There are other, this became much smaller than I thought. Sorry about that. This is the World Health Organization definitions that basically say that personality disorders are enduring behaviors and feelings, so they kind of stay with you throughout your whole life. They manifest during adolescence or late childhood, and in that sense they are development conditions, and they also represent extreme or very significant deviations than the average individual would act or behave in a given circumstances according to the culture that it belongs. So this is a very significant debate that I will not get into, but there are people that argue that the way we see mental disorders is very westernized and it's very white. So in other cultures, some things are not perceived as mental illness, whereas we in the West thinking that we are so great do. So before the model that I currently use, the DSM-4, which is kind of like the Bible for mental illnesses, it's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders. This is the 4th edition, revised one, and it's no longer in use because we are now on DSM-5, and this white, straight male Americans come together, psychiatrists, and they define what a personality pathology is, and in the model, they basically have things like shopping lists. So for you to qualify to have a personality disorder, you would have to, out of 10 symptoms, have 5 of them. And some people, myself included, when it was time to develop the new DSM, some scientists, some psychologists and psychiatrists started thinking, is this a great model? Because we really don't think it is. Why? Because it's categorical, meaning that you either have it or you don't have it. And as we know, things with the human mind and behavior, they're not black or white. It's not you have this trait, you have this symptom or you don't. And then also, it's not reliable because you end up diagnosing the same person with 2 personality disorders. So where are we right now? So it's not specific either because we're just talking about symptoms. We're not really talking about concrete things. And another thing, and this is particularly important for me, why 5? Why not 6? It's completely arbitrary. Studies show that some people that have less of those symptoms would actually qualify for a personality disorder based on other things. So this scientist, in particular one guy called Robert Kruger, developed a model for a different conceptualization and measurement of personality traits and personality disorders. So this is unformatted, so I'm sorry about that. So this DSM-5 personality disorder work group developed a trait-specific method where clinicians, rather than just ticking a box, you have this, or you don't have this, would rate the personality trait in the continuum of severity, meaning that you could have that trait in a small amount or in a bigger amount. Like when you're cooking and you add spices to a dish, if you have a lot of pepper, it's just going to taste like pepper and that's bad, but you can have a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And that's pretty much how other trait models work for adaptive personality or for normal personality, where factor models such as the Big Five will define your personality based on a continuum rather than a shopping list kind of system. So they developed this approach, and then the DSM people were like, oh, this is not great, we really need to do a little bit more. So they combined the previous one with the new one, and it was not accepted. So they said this cannot go into the section 2, which is where personality disorders lie in the DSM. But they were like, we have section 3, which is experimental things that need more research. So we went there. And what it basically says is, people, do research about that. And once I applied for my PhD, I wanted to do something about personality because personality is so fascinating and there's so much to do. And I came across this and I thought, I want to contribute to this model. I want to, because I do believe in it. I think it's a much better way of thinking about personality than the previous one. So I started researching about that. And to summarize it, 2 main criteria. There are 7 of them, but these are the 2 main important ones. For you to have a personality disorder, you need to have a general impairment in personality and functioning, and that could mean the way you relate to other people, or the way that you see yourself. And also, criterion B, which is a dimensional model of those traits, which I will bring down in the next slide. So this is where it gets cool. So there used to be 10 personality disorders before in the DSM-4, and we got rid of some of them. Now we only have 6, although narcissistic here is very controversial. Some people that do research about this think that narcissistic does not really have a place there. Some other people think there is a place for it. So the ones we have now is antisocial, avoidant, borderline, schizotypal, obsessive-compulsive, and narcissistic. So the antisocial one is the one that everyone associates with a psychopath. It's more prevalent in men than women statistically. The avoidant one are people that have a very serious difficulty in establishing relationships. Think of Charlie Brown from Peanuts. Borderline, people that usually have very problematic relationships. They also are have very strong feelings of depression and anxiety, usually associated with self-harm and suicidal ideation. Very problematic relationships in general. Schizotypal, they used to be described as the odd ones, so they're usually people that have very odd beliefs about mystical things or alternative realities, and they close themselves up into a safe space and like a kind of a haven. It's called a schizotypal haven. And then obsessive-compulsive, not to be confused with obsessive-compulsive disorder, which is a different thing. People that have obsessive thoughts, that are persistent in that manner, or compulsive behaviors such as washing your hands a certain number of times, or ritualistic behaviors such as that. And then narcissistic personality disorder with feelings of grandeur and manipulativeness and things like that. I could go into a lot more detail, but we'd be here all night. These are just little trailers. And diagnoses the personality disorders in terms of 5 domains of personality. Each of these 5 domains have personality traits under them. So I'll show you later. So the first one is negative affect or affectivity. This is basically strong negative feelings such as anxiety and depression. Can also be associated with behaviors of self-harm or suicidal ideation. Attachment, very general, difficulty in establishing meaningful social interactions with other human beings or relationships. Antagonism, when you basically go at odds with other people, you're callous, you're aggressive. Disinhibition, which is basically behavior towards instant self-gratification, not to be confused with being uninhibited, which is what happens when you drink. This is a different thing. Good example though. And then psychoticism, which has to do with other eccentric behaviors, also hallucinations or hearing voices, things like that. And then these are the 25 personality traits. I'm not going to read them all, but they are neatly ordered alphabetically, and they have things such as withdrawal, which belongs with the detachment domain, for example, or things such as anxiousness, which belongs to the negative affectivity, or anhedonia, which belongs to the negative affectivity as well. Anhedonia is when you're really not able to feel a lot of things, which is lethargic or those things. So what do I do with this model? I'm using emojis because it's a great language. So I study the personality traits and how they relate to relationships. And that could be a relationship towards a romantic partner or just a general thing. I work with attachment as well, which is as controversial as it is. It's a great proxy to measure the relationship you have with your caregiver in infancy. And I basically see how these traits impact the way you relate to other people and if they play a role in the way you the number of relationships you have, the reasons why you break up with your partners, how long your relationships last, and then if you are satisfied in a bunch of different ways with your romantic partner. And I also investigate intimacy in those relationships. And to bring back the point that Alfredo was making, people lie. So it's kind of complicated sometimes to ask very personal questions to people, particularly working with clinical populations, which I don't. But psychologists came up with this thing called a social desirability scale. So some of my instruments have a scale that will measure your degree of social desirability, which basically indicates that you might be lying on all the other questions to appear more socially desirable. And people tend to do that either because they idealize their romantic partners, or because they just don't want to admit to certain things, which is fair enough. The main instrument that I use is a 220-item scale, so it's very big, very lengthy, and it asks you very personal things such as, have you ever contemplated killing yourself? So some of the questions are very, very difficult, and you have to understand that some people might lie about them, or they might not even fill them out. So research with human beings is always complicated, but we try our best. So this is basically what I was telling you about. I also study populations, so I did a study with homeless people to find out if they have a higher prevalence of personality disorders or maladaptive personality traits, and unfortunately they do. Yeah, and I've told you about all that. Oh, I also do psychometric properties, which is a lot of statistics that I'm not going to bore you with right now. And this is a study that I did a while ago with 143 people. So I've run a lot of studies throughout my PhD. This is just one. There were undergrad students from Goldsmiths University. I asked them a bunch of things such as the number of relationships they've had, how long the current relationship, if they're having one, is lasting. This is in months, by the way. I asked them a lot of demographic questions so that I can try to understand how the personality traits might have an impact or a bearing in that. So these are some of the things that I found out. Okay, so detachment, remember the detachment one where you have difficulty in establishing relationships with other people? I found out that detachment negatively predicts the number of relationships people have, which I thought was really cool. And on the other hand, antagonism, which are those contradictory, callous, aggressive traits, is a significant positive predictor, meaning that if you actually score higher on this domain, you are much more likely to have you're much more likely to have a smaller number of relationships. I also found out that detachment is a negative predictor of satisfaction in a relationship. This may seem kind of obvious, right? You would imagine so, but these things need to be measured, particularly if you're working with a new model that has not been researched that much. So, for example, another thing that I found out is that an increase in the detachment scores is associated with a reduction in the likelihood of you being in a relationship. So basically, if you are a very detached person in scoring in all those traits belonging to the detachment, it's much more likely that you are single. I also found out that detachment negatively predicts emotional, social, and sexual recreation in a relationship. So detachment is kind of bad. In the sense that, well, we're obviously talking about maladaptive traits and domains here, so they're not going to be great in that sense. But the variability of those traits is also linked to variability in other aspects of your life and in a way that you relate to other people. So don't start panicking if you feel like you're particularly attached, because it's not as linear, right? So these are some of the things that I found out. There's something that is not here, but I also found out some of the psychoticism domains, so things like cognitive dysregulation or unusual beliefs and experiences, even some sort of mild hallucinations. They are significant positive predictors of sexual intimacy in a relationship, which is something that I really haven't figured out why, but I haven't got to that chapter in my thesis, so when I get there, I'll have to think about why that might be.
You're wrong.
I'm what?
Overrun.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah, so this is to summarize. Personality is difficult to conceptualize and to measure. It has a strong impact, however, on the way we relate to others. And it is better conceptualized in a spectrum rather than a shopping list kind of system. And we still have a lot of work to do because the